Are you ready for the good stuff? Man, I wanted to introduce a very special person. I've been chit-chatting with him this evening, and we spoke a couple weeks ago. So I got to know him a little bit and kind of just where his mind was. And I bet you're probably wondering, well, this is a Women's Connection event. Why is there a dude? Why is there a man here that's going to talk to us? But he's a very smart and very genuine gentleman with 10 years of youth experience. So he's been a youth pastor before. And now he's a Frisco police officer. And so God basically moved him from ministry to ministry in the streets. And he's very knowledgeable when it comes to our younger generation. And he has a heart for Jesus and leading the younger, our youth to Christ and their parents as well. So please help me welcome Matt Telapap.
Like really small steps, so I'm really glad I made that up. So for a couple of things first, I just really appreciate y'all having me here, especially for your first one. That's not a lot of pressure, but more than I realized when I said we would do this. Like I said, my name is Matt. This is my family, so this is my wife, Courtney, and my two children, Caleb and Cora. Cora just turned 9. Caleb's about to turn 7 next month. And all the stereotypes they tell you about young boys, of all the energy and everything else, that's my daughter. So the red hair sticks, and it holds true for her. She's our animal lover. We just got some goats for her, so she is in animal heaven right now, and it's been fantastic. But I would be remiss to come and especially talking about parenting and not acknowledge I actually got to come with my mom tonight. So my mom's here being a part. They came up for the weekend, so that's my mom. She's amazing. I didn't have to alter too much of my talk with her here in person now. But it's going to be outstanding. And so I want us to, as we talk about parenting, there's a couple things. If you came thinking you're going to get like the 3 easy steps to fix all your problems as a parent, I'm sorry. I really apologize. That's not where we're going to go tonight. That's not what we're going to be able to do, because the reality is parenting is incredibly hard. It's incredibly difficult. And you as moms mean so much. And as a dad and as a husband, I just want to say thank you. Because it is many times a thankless job that we will either sometimes pass over and be like, oh, thanks for doing that. Thanks for doing this task. Thanks for doing this thing. Thank you for my children being fed. But we don't say, just thank you for being who you are as a mom, for being the one who stewards our children, who brings our children to the Lord, and is able to be there for them. So thank you for everything you do. And it's not unseen. God sees you. He sees the tireless hours. He sees you in that moment when you feel like everything has gone wrong that day. When every single one of your children's a mess, they've eaten nothing but carbohydrates and cheese all day. When you feel like the house is completely a wreck, you've raised your voice 10 times. He sees you in those moments. He sees you in the moments when you've also done everything right. When you've had that victory day. Like we all know, like there's going to be those days as parents. We're going to have that victory day where it's like my kids ate 3 meals with green stuff on their plate. Like they laughed and they played together. They didn't fight. The house is clean. The laundry is done. I'm feeling great. I slept 8 hours last night. It is a great day. My husband and I went on a date. It's a victory day. But we're also going to have those other days, right? Where we feel like we're the worst parent in the world. We screamed and we yelled. We got angry. I yelled at the dog because it was laying there. Like, I mean, just everything has gone wrong that day. And those days are going to happen because parenting is incredibly difficult. So as we talk tonight, we're going to talk some practical things and some strategies that we can do, but we're mostly talking principles. How can we look at principles that God's given us in parenting that we're all going to apply differently? Because the other reality is what works for me and my children is not going to necessarily work for you. There is no one right way to do this. There are some, and my guess is somebody here stands on the hill and says, my kids are never going to eat processed food. They're going to eat nothing but non-GMO, organic. And if anyone, and they will never eat anything other than that. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. That's fantastic. And there's someone else who's like, if I get a bag of Cheetos and they will be quiet for 15 minutes, fantastic. And that's okay too. We're not all going to have the same answers. We're not going to all apply the principles the same way, and that's okay. This is not a cookie cutter sort of deal. And so if we can hone in on the principles and the concepts, and then we can all apply them a little bit differently. And then at the end, we're going to talk some strategies and some more practical stuff. But I want to start with the concepts. And the number one thing is we parent for an audience of one. This is the foundation. This is the baseline that we have to build on, is we parent for an audience of one. I want you to think about Chick-fil-A. If Chick-fil-A had a group of vegans, and there's nothing wrong with vegans. If you're vegan, that's fantastic. That's great. That's a personal choice, and we just make different choices, and that's okay. But if a group of vegans came to Chick-fil-A and said, I really don't like your marketing campaign. I think your marketing campaign is terrible that you use cows to try and get more people to eat more chickens, and I don't like it. Chick-fil-A is going to probably say, in a very loving and God-fearing way, because it's God's chicken, and they're going to say, thank you for your input. We appreciate the conversation, but you're not my audience. Like, you are not who I'm trying to market to. I know you're not going to come to our store. I know you're not going to get a chicken sandwich because you don't eat chicken. And that's okay. I got no problem with that. I'm not mad about it. But you're not my audience, so why would we change our entirety marketing campaign to cater to someone who's not even our audience in the first place? In the same sense, for us, if we are parenting for an audience of one, then we can start to focus and hone in our parenting and start to discard some of the outside voices and some of the outside noise. Because we all know from the moment you announce you're pregnant, you are going to get bombarded with parenting advice. So I was a youth pastor when we got pregnant the first time. I say we, my wife got pregnant for the first time. So now imagine young 25-year-old youth pastor in a church of about 2,000 people who just love to give advice. It was, I couldn't take it all in. It was like, I don't even know what to do. Every Sunday morning, it was nonstop and it was constant. And I know moms, y'all get it even more. And some of it's advice, and some of it's like expectations that are placed on you that are like completely unrealistic. And so if we start to hone in on that parenting for the audience of one, then we can look at what does that actually mean. So we're going to look at Colossians chapter 3, verse 17. So Paul is writing to the church in Colossae, and this at the time the church is like arguing over like really minuscule things, like who can eat what, when they can eat it, who you can eat it with, who can say what and when and where, and all these like minor details, and they're bickering and they're fighting. It's basically first century next door neighbor app, basically, is what's going on here. And so this is what Paul writes to them. So he's answering all these questions, and he wraps it up with this verse, and it says, and whatever you do, whether in word or in deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him. Basically what he says is whatever you're doing, if you can sit there and say, I am doing this in the name of the Lord, you're good. Now, that means we can't go and do like sinful activity and say, I'm doing this in the name of the Lord. Like those two things are mutually exclusive, right? I can't go to a party, get hammered with a bunch of women who are not my wife, and say, I'm doing this in the name of the Lord. Like that doesn't, those two things are mutually exclusive and they don't exist. But he's saying if you're operating within the confines of what God's directed us as, and you can say, I'm doing this in the name of the Lord, then go and do it. If that's what God's called you to, then go and do it. And so if it says do everything, that would include our parenting. That means I need to parent in the name of the Lord. I need to parent for the glory of God. So it begs the question, what does God want from me as a parent? Like what does God want from me as a parent? Because the reality struck in with me early on. I had a mentor that told me this, and it was incredibly sobering for me. He said, you're going to stand before the creator of the universe one day, and you're going to give an account of your life. That includes you are going to give an account of your parenting. I am going to stand before Almighty God at the throne of Almighty God, and I am going to give an account of my parenting. Now, that's an incredibly heavy weight, and that's not the intent of what I'm trying to convey here. So we're going to kind of hear that, because that should be a sobering thought, but it's also a freeing one. Because now I realize if that's my goal, if that's my reality, then I can start to focus all of my parenting decisions on that one moment, that singular focus. And so when we look at Scripture, we're going to jump. I'm going to jump on the slide, guys. I'm sorry. We're going to jump to go down to Proverbs, the Proverbs verse 22:6. It says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it." So this is what matters to God. Train up your child in the way he should go. In other versions, it says, in the instruction of the Lord. Train up your child in the instruction of the Lord. So when God says, this is what I want out of a parent, he says, train your child in the instruction of the Lord. So when I stand before God Almighty himself and I give an account of my parenting, I am confident that my kid's report card is not going to come up in the conversation. My kid's batting average is not going to come up in the conversation. Their diet habits, their play habits, how much screen time they had, these things aren't coming up in the conversation. What's coming up in the conversation is, did I train and bring up my children in the instruction of the Lord? Did my kids know Jesus or have every opportunity to be introduced to the gospel of Jesus Christ because of me and how I parented? That's it. That's the focus of the conversation. So now when we get bombarded with all of these outside voices and all of these just expectations, and you got to make sure your kid's on time to this practice, and you got to make sure that their clothes are done this way, and they need to own this toy, and they need to have this amount of time to do this, and they need to do this, and they need to do that, and you need to do this, and the laundry pile's too high. We can sit there and stop and go, hold on. Am I training my child in the instruction of the Lord? And it allows us to also have the conversation of, hey, thank you for the input, but you're not my audience. So I'll give you a personal example of a decision in our life when we had kids. Both my wife and I grew up in Austin. We did escape. It's okay. We made it up here. It's fantastic. But we grew up in Austin, and in Austin, the homeschool community is not very prevalent. It's not very large. It's not big. It's not really a thing there. I knew like one or two homeschool families from our church, and they were the stereotype of what you would think a homeschool family looks like. We're just gonna end it there, right? I think everyone's got this picture now, right? We have the picture. They were homeschooling their children to break them away and keep them hidden from the world. Like I don't want them to know what is in the world, and so they hid them from the world in homeschool. And so it was not the best picture of what homeschool could be or possibly could be. And so when we had kids, we never thought in a million years we would homeschool our kids. The question was, do we go to like a private school and find a way to save up money for that, or do we go to public school and deal with the struggles and challenges that are public school? And then, as our kids go on, my wife was a mechanical engineer, and she's incredibly smart, far smarter than I ever dreamed to be. And she came to me and said, I think God's calling me to stay at home with the kids. Mind you, at the time, her salary was double mine. So we were going to cut our household income by 2/3. I was like, that's a really cool thing that God wants you to do, and I think that's fantastic. However, I don't question what God said, I'm questioning whether you heard it right. Right? Like, so what we did is we weren't obedient, and my wife went to part-time. She went to 20 hours a week, and it was awful. It was terrible. Every minute she was at work, she hated it because she was away from our children because we weren't being obedient to God. Like, it's just, we can talk about all the different, like, financial reasons and time reasons, but the reality was we were miserable because we weren't being obedient to God. And so she then became a full-time stay-at-home mom. And then a couple years later, as our daughter is getting close to kindergarten, she goes, I think God wants us to homeschool. Cool. But I don't have a picture of what that looks like. And as I started to go further into youth ministry, I started to realize that the only kids in my ministry that were not overwhelmed and stressed out by their workload were my homeschool kids. And I also realized there was multiple kids that were like really socially like well off, and they could have conversations with other human beings, and they like all these different things, and they were homeschool kids. And so we realized that our perception was what was off. So when we decided we were going to homeschool our kids and we told our families about that, we got a little bit of pushback. And it was reasonable, it was good, it was not like this negative, harsh deal, but it was, once again, the perception of what homeschool was and what we knew it to be was very different than what homeschool is for us. And so we started to get some pushback from our families and questioning, some of it healthy, some of it not as healthy. But we were able to say, hey, we really appreciate the input. We value our parents, and they're incredible parents, and they're incredible grandparents, and we really value their input. And we could say, thank you so much for caring enough about us and our kids to have these conversations with us. But at the end of the day, you're not our audience. We value, like, don't hear me, that's not a negative. That's just the reality that our audience is God. And if we're parenting for an audience of one, we get to take in the voices, but we don't have to allow it to impact us. We don't have to allow it to sway us to the left and the right, and every single wave of society, as it tells us our kids have to do this and our kids have to do that, and they've got to have so many extracurricular activities, or they're not going to get into this college, or they're not going to do this, or they're not going to do that. And we can kind of say, okay, that's cool. I appreciate the input, but I parent for an audience of one, and what he cares about is this. Am I training them in the instruction of the Lord? And the other piece it allows us to do is at the end of the day, and I know this to be true of, and not because I am a woman, but because I have a wife, and at the end of the day, when you look at your to-do list, how many have to-do lists? Okay, got it. I don't, by the way. But when you look at your to-do list, and it's longer at the end of the day than it was at the beginning of the day. When you look around your house, and it's dirtier at the end of the day than it was at the beginning of the day. And the laundry pile is higher than your oldest child. And the kitchen's a mess. You've argued with your spouse and everything else, and you start to feel that weight and being overwhelmed. You have a chance to take a deep breath, exhale, and say, did I honor God with my parenting today? And if the answer is yes, well done. Fantastic. Way to go. You nailed it. That's an awesome day. Are there chores to do tomorrow? Sure. But you can lay your head on the pillow knowing that one day when I stand before the Father and I give an account, I can stand with my chest held high and I can pull my shoulders back and I can say, I did everything I could to honor you with my parenting. Because I parented for an audience of one and I focused in on what was really, truly important. And it also allows us to simplify our decisions. I don't know how about you guys, but decisions can be really, really tough when it comes to kids. Because there's so many factors. You got to factor schedules of who has 6 kids? You have 6 kids? God bless you. My gosh. I don't know how you do schedules. And you're like, I don't either. We make it work. And you make it work. But there's so many factors. When you start talking about making decisions, you have to look at schedules of not just your schedule and your work schedule and the other kids' schedules and the sports schedules and the school schedule and the church schedule and right? Like we're all like, what in the world? We're at 10 schedules. And I miss some. But we can start to simplify and say, which one of these things is going to help me the most bring up my child in the training and instruction of the Lord? It helps us to refine and define what's important to us based off what's important to our audience. And our audience says, bring your children up in the training and instruction of the Lord. So when we begin to look at things like schedules, and I played college baseball at a relatively high level, at the Division I level. I loved it. It was an incredible experience. I got to do a lot of things because of baseball, and it was amazing. And so I got to train at a high level and all those things. So I'm not saying sports are a bad thing at all, but they sure as heck can be. And so when we start to look at our kids' schedules, I want us to honestly look at how many hours in the week are devoted to them meeting Jesus. That doesn't mean, because a lot of times that we simplify this, right? And we say, well, you've got to be at church on Wednesday night for youth, and you've got to be at church on Sunday morning for church. And that's great. Those are really good. Don't hear me say negative things about that. They should be. But if we're saying, hey, we're going for baseball, and they play on a Sunday morning, my question is, okay, if you're going to miss church, what are we doing as a family to then bring our children into the presence of God that week? So it takes a little bit more work. Not saying it can't be done, but my guess is we have Rock Creek probably videos our services, correct? Do we as a family come together Sunday night after the games and we sit down and we pop popcorn and we make it a family thing and we sit down and we watch church together so that we can still have the importance and value of church in our home? Do we take the time to listen to the sermon and then have the conversation with our kids, and which means, by the way, we actually have to pay attention to the sermon so that we can then have a conversation with our kids about that? So don't feel like we have to get cookie cutter with it and say, well, any sport that plays on Sunday is now out the window. What it means is we have to make these decisions, that if I'm going to make a decision that we're going to play a sport that meets on Sunday, that plays on Sunday morning sometimes, then we're going to have to do something outside of that to bring up our children in the training and instruction of the Lord. We may have to get creative with it, but ultimately it allows us then to refine those decisions and maybe sometimes go, you know what? That's good, but not great, so we're going to let it go. This thing, whatever it is, dance, horseback riding, baseball, softball, whatever clubs there are in a school, we're going to start kind of peeling some of these things off because it's getting in the way of an opportunity for our kids to get into the Word of God and meet Jesus. Once again, I'm not saying grades are bad, but we have, in my opinion, in this community, in this area of Texas, we have idolized grades. We have said that if my kids doesn't have straight A's or straight A's and B's, that they're doing something wrong. I have an associate's degree from a community college and a bachelor's degree in sports management from a small school that no one's ever heard of. And I feel like I have a really good job. My guess is a lot of us are probably the same thing. The Ivy League schools are super, super small, and a super small percentage of people go to Ivy League schools, but yet we have an expectation that our kids have resumes to get into an Ivy League school when they have no intention of ever doing that. There was a letter from a principal, McKinney Boyd, a few years back when I was a youth pastor, that she wrote to parents basically saying, chill out. This is a principal of a school. And she said, majority of our students are going to go to UNT or Collin College or UT or A&M. Why in the world do we need them to have these resumes to get into a Harvard, Yale, or whatever else when they're going to go to one of these schools anyways? I had a conversation with students when we were on a mission trip in Peru because I had a student that was, she was fourth in her class, and she was uber stressed about her grades because she needed to get into the school she wanted to go to. I sat down with her and I said, do you think there's people that are going to A&M right now that got C's in high school? Well, yeah, there's 50,000 people at the school. And she's like, well, logically, yes, of course there are. Then why do you need straight A's? Once again, straight A's are not a bad thing. Please don't hear me say that school is bad. What I'm saying is, when you have a student in public school, many times, because I've lined this out with parents over and over and over again, they're usually working 40 to 50-hour work weeks, typically. When you add in school time, extracurricular time, practices, and homework, it's usually between 45 and 55 hours a week on average. If we have spouses that are working 50 to 60 hours a week, we're probably having conversations about the value of being home more. But yet we have our 12-year-olds and 14-year-olds working that level of hours each week. It's no wonder they're stressed. It's no wonder that they're having these crippling battles of anxiety because they don't have the time management skills that we have as adults, but we're expecting them to do the same level of work to put in. So my question to parents has always been, would it be okay if they didn't do that homework assignment? What's going to happen? They maybe get a 50 on the homework assignment because they turned it in a day late, and their grade came down somewhere in the 0.7 to 1 point range, typically. So if we're parenting for an audience of one, and when I stand before the Father, what he's going to ask me is, did you bring up your children in the training and instruction of the Lord? Did you bring them up to know me? Is my answer going to be, we went to church a lot, and they had great grades? I don't think that's the answer he's looking for. Once again, grades are not bad. Sports are not bad. None of this is bad or negative, but at least it allows us to start to focus and hone in and look for opportunities. Car rides are amazing opportunities. Don't give up the car ride because they are trapped. Like, hopefully buckled in really tight, but they're trapped. Don't give up the car ride because when you start to look at the times and the schedules and you're like, how am I going to get everything in? But I also need to talk to him about Jesus. I got a 30-minute car ride. And I'm sitting still for most of it because I'm in traffic. So don't give up the car and don't look for constant opportunities of ways that we can have those meaningful conversations with our kids. And we can do exactly what God's called us to do. And it will, like I said, it will allow us to hone in on those voices that typically the voices sound like, are you really not going to let your kid go to that movie? Are you really not going to let your kid come to the sleepover? Are you really not going to let your kid play on the travel team? Are you really not going to let your kid fill in the blank with whatever it is? And we can say, thank you for the input. I appreciate the conversation, but you're not my audience. Politely, obviously, we're not going to be mean about it, but you're not my audience. So if you disagree with something, a decision I'm making, that's okay. We have different perspectives on things, and that's okay. But I parent for an audience of one, and you're not it. So yes, I'm not going to let my kid do this. Or yes, I am going to make my kid do this that you don't agree with. And that's okay, because you're not my audience to begin with. So we parent for the audience one. The second principle is this. And this is one of my favorite analogies of all time. You are your child's lifeguard, not their life vest. I want everybody to say this with me. I am my child's lifeguard, not their life vest. Fantastic. Now we're talking in broad principles, and we need to talk about what these two things do. A lifeguard stands on the side of the pool and watches intently and fervently to ensure that nobody drowns. A life vest ensures that no one goes underwater. Those are two very different things. And if you've ever been to Great Wolf Lodge, anyone ever been to Great Wolf Lodge? You've seen the most intense lifeguards of your entire life. These guys are phenomenal. They will sit on the side of the pool and they will walk and they go scan, 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 side of the pool. And they'll go scan, 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 side of the pool. And for hours, I'm like, oh my gosh, they have got to be so dizzy. But they are intense and they are insane, but you know what? No one's drowning on their watch. It's fantastic. And that's what we are as parents, is we have to be the ones that are standing on the side of the pool and we are watching intently and we're ensuring that our kids don't drown. But I'm not saying they're never going to go underwater. I'm going to make sure if I start seeing bubbles that I'm going to jump in, but it doesn't mean they never go underwater. It also doesn't mean there's never a time for a life vest. I'm not going to the pool, throwing my 1-year-old in, and looking at the lifeguard and like, you got this, I'm out, right? We're not doing that. The 1-year-old is going in with a life vest, okay? And if it's the first kid, they're probably gonna have the water wings with like the floaty there, the wings, they're gonna have a floaty around their side, and we're gonna hold them the entire time. If it's the fourth kid, they're gonna have like the half blown up floaties on the arms, right? And the oldest one's gonna watch them, right? That's how that's going down. But I'm not saying there's never a life vest moment. What I'm saying is, as a generality, as a principle, we need to be our child's lifeguard, not their life vest. We have to allow our kids to fail with a safety net. We have to allow our children to fail when they are in a safe place and have a safety net. Unfortunately, in my current role, I deal with a lot of people who have never had the opportunity to fail with a safety net, and I'm not it. I'm the exact opposite of a safety net, right? And so many times I deal with young people, and the line I use over and over and over again is, you are making juvenile decisions with adult consequences. And you're facing adult consequences, but you're still acting like a juvenile. And that's a problem. That leads to really heavy consequences. And so we as parents need to give our kids that space to fail. When my daughter was about 4 or 5, we have one of those geodomes. You know what I'm talking about? I know it is a jungle gym, but they're now called geodomes because apparently jungle gym was not politically correct somehow. So we had this geodome in our backyard, and we had a couple that had moved in from a state to the west that usually doesn't view things the same way we do. And did not have kids yet. Or maybe their firstborn had just been born, and they were very concerned about safety. And so we're outside at our house, and the husband and I are grilling, and we're at the grill, and my daughter climbs on top of the Geodome and stands on top of it and says, "Daddy, look!" And I turn around and go, "Awesome! Way to go!" And he turns around and goes, "What if she falls?" And I go, "Man, that's really gonna hurt." And I tell you, this man was stressed out the entire time we were outside. And he could not believe. He was judging me so hard as a parent. He could not believe that I allowed my daughter to stand on top of the Geodome. Granted, the first time she climbed that thing, I was the whole way up, right underneath her. But she had shown me over time that she knew what she was doing. She was capable of doing this. Does that mean she's never going to fall? Of course not. Is it going to hurt? Sure. But we have to give them that opportunity and that space to fail when we have a safety net. A easy, simple example is when your kid goes to school and you get that phone call 30 minutes after the bell rings. "Mom, I forgot my SALT map and it's due in 15 minutes. You got to bring it up here right now." Do you? Is that their responsibility? Yeah. I will never forget when I was in 5th grade, Miss Hobby's English class. We had a project that we had to design. We had to come up with an invention and design an invention. And I had come up with I want to say flying car, I believe. And I had made the thing out of Legos because you had to build a prototype. And as one might have it, building a prototype of something that will actually fly as a 5th grader is really hard. So I built this thing out of Legos. And I forgot it at home. So I go to the office, I pick up the phone, I call my dad, and he says, "Man, I bet you wish you'd put that by the front door like I told you to." "Yes, sir, I do. Can you bring it here?" "Nah, sure can't." And so I had to, no, that's the right reaction. That's right, you should laugh at 5th grade me. It's okay. That's fine. But he's like, and I was like, "Dad, what are you doing?" He's like, "I'm sitting at home." "Okay, well, you don't go to work yet." "I know." "Why won't you bring it to me?" "Because that was your responsibility." I am 35 years old, and I remember that lesson. If he had brought me that Lego flying car, would I remember that he brought it to me? Not a chance. But he said, "You know what? That was your responsibility." And I got a 70. A 70 on that project. And guess what? I made it out of 5th grade. I have a college degree. And I have multiple professions. And I made it without my dad rescuing me in 5th grade. And I realize that's kind of an easy, slow-pitch softball type answer. But it's those types of opportunities where we have the opportunity to let our kids experience pain, and we learn from pain. Was I embarrassed standing in front of the class that everyone else had their prototypes, and I said, "Here's my thing that's here"? Yeah, that was embarrassing. Once again, I'm 35 years old, and I still remember that lesson. And guess what I do now when I need to remember things? I set it by the front door. Because I know I'm going to forget things. So we have to give our kids that opportunity to fail. And the way it ties in with the audience of one, because they tie in so perfectly, my wife took our kids to the swimming pool one day, and my son is a spastic human being. Everything he does is just, he's a 6-year-old boy, he's all boy, and he is a spastic human being. So when he swims, he does not look like he can swim. But he is a good swimmer, and we know he's a good swimmer. So my wife takes our 2 kids to the pool. My daughter's just looking super graceful, having a great time. My son looks like the buoy out in the ocean that's going under the water, above the water, under the water, above the water. And the lifeguard comes over to my wife and said, "Can you put some floaties on your kid? Because he's terrifying the lifeguards." And she said, "I promise, I'm watching my children. He knows how to swim. I got this." You're going to have moments where you are allowing your children to fail. They didn't bring their cleats, and you're not going home to get them, and they're going to play in their flip-flops. And there is going to be a parent that's going to walk over to you like, I cannot believe that you would not go get his cleats. Guess whose responsibility that was? And guess what? You're not my audience. So if you can't believe it, that's okay. We're going to be all right. My kid's going to survive. He's going to remember getting stepped on in his flip-flops. Or better yet, the referee won't let him play the game, and he's got to cheer his team on from the sideline because he forgot his shoes. He's going to be okay. He missed a 7-year-old soccer game. It's going to be all right. In the same sense, if you go home and get your kids' shoes for them, that's okay too. But we can now make those decisions based off those points. Go, you know what? Is this the life vest moment, or is this the lifeguard moment? And if we choose for the life vest moment, that's okay. We're going to all make different decisions in that spectrum. But at least we're consciously making that decision, knowing that we're declaring this is a life vest moment, and I'm going to protect them from this pain. I'm going to keep them from going underwater at this point. That's okay. Your 16-year-old, when they start to drive, that's a life vest moment. Like, I'm not letting a 16-year-old go on DNT at 7 p.m. or 6 p.m. the first time they're going to drive. That's a bad idea, right? So that's a life vest moment. I'm going to protect them from themselves. I'm going to keep them from going underwater. But there's also that moment where they've proven that they're responsible, and they've shown that they're a good driver, and they've shown that they can do things, and they say, Mom, I want to drive to Little Elm to go to this friend's house. You go, here's the keys. And you give it to them, and it's that lifeguard moment. Hey, text me when you get there. Put your phone in your backpack and don't touch it until you get there. Like, we can still coach them and teach them and give them pointers, but at some point in time, we got to, this is really hard, but I'm going to treat this as the lifeguard moment. I'm going to step back, and I'm going to do everything I can to watch them fervently to ensure they don't drown. So we parent for an audience of one, and we are our child's lifeguard, not their life vest. So I want to give you a few tools now for your tool belt in the form of some questions and responses. Because the thing about parenting is you're also going to have, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, you're going to have the oh crap moment where your kid at some point in time is going to hear something at school. And they're going to come home and say, Mom, what is a... And they're going to fill in that blank, right? And you're like, what do I do with this? What do you do? I don't know what to do. And it is terrifying. So I want to give you a few phrases and questions that can be the first words out of your mouth and some follow-up questions that are going to give you that freak out space. Because what's going on in your mind right now is freaking out, and that's okay. So the first words out of your mouth are, thank you so much for trusting me enough to come to me with this. Thank you so much for trusting me enough to come to me with this. Because what we want to do is build that space for our kids where this is a safe space. This is a safe place to come and ask the questions of whatever it is, as crazy as it may be, as lewd as it may be, because they don't know what that is, so they don't realize they're asking a really lewd question. This is a safe place to come with everything. So thank you so much for trusting me enough to come talk to me about this. The second thing to say, and this is the first question, is what do you mean by that? So when a kid makes a declaration and they say, I am blank, or I am doing blank, or this blank happened, what do you mean by that? When I was a student pastor, I had a 7th grade girl come talk to me one night, and she's like dead serious. Like, you can tell this is one of those moments of like, ooh, this is going to be something heavy. And she goes, Matt, I need to talk to you afterwards. Okay. So I'm thinking like, maybe something's going on at home, there's a family violence situation, or like a divorce, or like something heavy. And so we go, there was like a little main, like a cafe area where I could be away from the group, but everyone could still, see us, so it's appropriate and everything. And so I sit down with her. She gets really serious. She takes a deep breath. She looks down. She goes, I think I'm bi. What do you mean by that? Well, I have a crush on 2 different boys. Bi means 2. She likes 2 boys, so she's bi. If I did not ask the question, what do you mean by that? We would have had a very different conversation, right? So when a kid comes in, and because the reality is what she had heard at school over and over and over and over again was other kids saying that they were bi. Or she heard it in a song, or she heard it on the TV, or she saw it on social media. She had heard this term, bisexual, and she didn't want to ask the question, what is that? Because then you have to admit that you don't know. So you just kind of use context clues to come up with an answer, and now that's your answer, and as far as you know, that's what it means, and you're convinced that's what it means. So then you declare, I'm bisexual, and if someone doesn't ask the question, what in the world do you mean by that? She would have gone on forever declaring she was bisexual, having no earthly idea what that word meant. So we have to dig in and say, what do you mean by that? So that we are having the right conversation. It's like this, the other adage is like when a 6-year-old comes and says, Mommy, where do babies come from? And you're like, all right, cool. And you start going scientific. You start having the birds and the bees conversation. Like, I just meant what hospital? Like, Mommy, where did I come from? I meant which hospital was I born at? Like, that's all I want to know. Like, I did not need everything else that you just came at me with. So ask the question, what do you mean by that? So that you can truly understand. And the reality is she might have said, I like guys and I like girls. Cool. We can have it. Not cool. But we can have that conversation. Now I know what conversation we're having, and we can actually have a conversation about what is really going on versus what I assume is going on, because I know what that word actually means. So what do you mean by that? And then when a kid is telling you about their feelings, when they're coming and saying, I am just extremely upset, I'm angry, this happened at school, fill in the blank, they tell you about what's going on. Tell me more about that. That's the next phrase. Tell me more about that. Because the reality is kids are mostly going to come with about the surface level, about 10%. So what they're telling you on the surface is about 10% of what is really going on, or what they're really thinking. So we want to draw out that conversation. We want to get more information from them. Tell me more about that so I can hear you. I want to, and it's incredibly powerful as a parent when you tell your kid, I want to hear you. I don't want you to hear me right now. I want to truly hear you. I want to understand you. I want to understand what you're going through. Tell me more about that, please, so I can better understand and experience what you're experiencing. That is going to open up the floodgates with your kid. That is going to give you such a safe environment for them to come and talk to you, because they feel heard, they feel appreciated, they feel respected, just like each one of us, even as adults. How many times have you gone to talk to somebody and you start to tell them the situation, and within about 30 seconds they jump into advice mode? And I get it. Husbands are the worst at this. I'm sorry. I will declare that now. I get it. Everyone's nodding. I hear it, heard, received. We are terrible about that because we jump into solve mode. But we do that to each other all the time, where it's like, I'm really struggling with my kid eating their dinner. Something simple. And someone immediately jumps into, well, have you tried cooking this? Have you tried cooking this? There's this cookbook over here online. You can actually order the kids' meals. Have you seen the ad on Facebook where it's like, you can get all these meals for your kids and they love them and it's healthy? Like, okay, what I meant to say was I'm pulling my hair out trying to get my kid to stop screaming at me every time we sit down for dinner. It has nothing to do with the food I'm fixing them. But you jumped immediately to solve a problem that you thought the problem was this. And then we do the same thing to our kids all the time. They come to us and they say, hey, I have this issue, I have this problem, I'm experiencing this, I'm feeling this. And I get it, kids are manipulative. So they're going to come and say, you made me feel this way, my son is the worst about this. You made me feel bad when you did this. Okay, so I can immediately jump to like, son, I didn't make you feel bad. You're trying to manipulate the situation to get out of being in trouble. Or I could say, tell me more about that. Tell me more about how you're feeling. And if they're truly trying to manipulate you, they're not going to have anything else. And it's going to start to come out that really they're just trying to manipulate the situation because they know they're in trouble. Or you might discover that there's something under the surface that you don't know about yet. There's something going on that they're afraid to tell you, that they're scared to tell you. Maybe it's something they've done wrong. Maybe it's something that's happened to them, and they're scared to tell you, so they're coming at you with that 10%. And if we stay at the 10%, they will stay at the 10%. But if we open that door to the other 90%, they will dive right in. And it may take some time. It may take some multiple conversations, but they will get there and they will open up. I told a group of parents that had incoming sixth graders, and one of the women in this group was one of our elders' wives. So when you're a brand new youth pastor and an elder's wife is in a meeting with you about sixth graders, that's a little bit nerve-wracking. She's like, I really like my job and I want to have it tomorrow. And I made a comment that as parents, we have to learn a poker face. We have to have a poker face because of that 10%, 90%. Because as your kids get older, what you'll discover is they will come and they will confess something or they will bring something to you that is the 10%. So if your kid gets busted with weed at school, the first thing they're probably going to come tell you about is that they cheated on their homework or they forgot their homework or they were late on a project or something like that. And if we take that and we go to a 10 with it, they're going to do everything they can to hide the other stuff. Because if I go to a 10 at homework, what do you think I'm going to do with you getting busted with drug paraphernalia at school? That's no longer safe. I'm going to get home early and erase voice messages. Sorry, Mom, I know you're kind of learning about this now. Didn't see that one coming. I'm going to get home from school earlier than I normally do. I'm going to find a way to race home, and I'm going to delete voice, because we had the voice machines, and now kids can't do that as easily. But we got home where they would have the voice message on the machine, and we could delete it before Mom and Dad got home. And it worked out okay until they found out about it. That got really bad. But my point is they're going to do everything they can to hide that. We have to have the poker face. Okay? Or when they come with you and say, this is what's happening to me. This is what's going on in my life. In here, freaking out. Bells, whistles, everything else. Thank you so much for trusting me enough to come talk to me about this. Tell me more about that. And then let's get into that 90% so that we can truly help our kids get to the next thing. The last piece that I encourage parents on a regular basis to ask their kids. I think it's a monthly rhythm that's really, really good. Is there anything you have watched, read, or seen that made you feel uncomfortable, scared, or that you have questions about? Is there anything that you've watched, read, or seen that made you feel uncomfortable or that you have questions about? Because I get it. This is a scary world we live in right now. And kids have far more access to anything to the world than they've ever had before. And this isn't really a talk on technology, so that can be another conversation another day where we really dive into technology. But there's so much access. And we can't block our kids from everything. It's just not possible. Because you can have your kid completely locked down, but guess who doesn't? Everybody else, right? And it's not a us versus them. It's just a reality that we have to understand and accept, that our kids are going to get exposed to things, and that are going to make them uncomfortable, uneasy. They're going to have questions. And guess who they don't necessarily want to go talk to about it? Mom and Dad. They want to. I take that back. They want to. But I don't know about you, it was a little bit awkward for me to have that conversation with Mom and Dad. But if from a young age, even if you have 4, 5, 6-year-olds, have this conversation with them. Check in with them. Hey, is there anything on a TV show that you had questions about? Because I don't know if you've noticed, but Netflix isn't the best for kids right now. Once again, we have Netflix. I'm not saying Netflix is you can't have Netflix in your house. All I'm saying is there are TV shows. I just saw a clip before I came here that was 2 dinosaur dads with the stone eggs because they wanted their own babies. Right. That's the right answer. Why is that in a 3-year-old show? But it's there. And I know you moms do such an amazing job because my wife is incredible about it, and I know y'all do too. Like, you scour the TV shows, and you go and read the reviews, and you check the books. My daughter reads like 3 to 5 chapter books a week. She loves to read, and she's a phenomenal reader. There is 0% chance that we can read every single one of those books before she does. Not possible. So instead, the best we can do is check in with her. Like, we look at the series and we try to see what's the content, is it appropriate? But that doesn't mean there's not something in there that she doesn't have questions about. So the best thing I can do for my 9-year-old is to sit down with her and say, hey, is there anything you've read recently that you had questions about, or that made you feel uncomfortable, or you weren't sure if it was right? Now we have an open door to get into that 90%. It also will show them that this is a safe place to come with my questions. Our homes need to be a safe place for them to come with our questions. And it starts with us seeking out that information from them and having that opportunity there. So we parent for an audience of 1. That is my audience. That's who that is everything. And I can hone in my decisions. I can focus, and I can start to tune out some of those, all the noise and the voices in society that says I have to do all these things in order to be a good mom. I have to accomplish all of these tasks. And we haven't even talked about the wife portion yet, right? Y'all have so much weight on you as a mom and as a wife. But if we can start to tune out some of those things so we can focus on the one audience that matters. And at the end of the day, if you can sit there, and I genuinely encourage you to ask this question, did I honor God with my parenting today? The answer is yes. Well done. Fantastic. Great day, Mom. I don't care what the laundry pile looks like. I don't care what the kitchen looks like. I don't care if it's been 3 weeks since you vacuumed the house. I don't care if your kid is still wearing the same clothes from 3 days ago. Did I honor God with my parenting today? Did I help my children know Jesus better with my actions, my words, and my deeds today? Then great job, well done. That's what truly matters to the audience that we are parenting for. And it allows us to step in and be the lifeguard for our kids because we're trusting God with our kids. They're His kids that we get to steward, so I can be the lifeguard of them and not in the life vest for them. And then we can make our homes a safe place for them to come and bring those questions to. Again, I want to acknowledge one other piece that is really hard sometimes for the church to acknowledge. Because when we talk about parenting, we make the assumption that it's a home with a mom and a dad who love each other, who love their children, who are fully invested in their kids' lives and in the marriage and in the home, and they want what's best for each other and they want what's best for the kids, and everyone's fully devoted and connected and committed. And that's just not the reality of every home. And I recognize that. And again, God sees you. If you're the single mom or the stepmom or in the blended family dynamic or all the different family dynamics that exist, or a husband that's checked out, or a dad who doesn't want to be the active parent, God sees you. He sees your effort. He sees everything, the struggles that you have, and He is there with you. He is encouraging you, and He is walking alongside you. And I hope you can feel that encouragement and know that you are seen, and that there are people who want to, here in this church, who want to walk alongside you as well. That you don't have to go at this alone. Please do not take this journey alone. And if you're feeling that today, I beg of you, don't leave tonight feeling alone. Talk to one of these ladies. Talk to someone and say, I feel like I'm on an island. My family lives across the country. Whatever the different circumstances can be. Don't leave still feeling alone. God didn't create us to be alone individually. He didn't create us to parent alone. He didn't create us to mom alone. So don't go at it alone. Build a community around you, regardless of the circumstances and situations that you find yourself in, because that's what He desires for you. So I'm going to pray over us, and then we'll have the Q&A, and we'll ask whatever questions, and I'll do my very, very best to answer everything I can. God, thank you for tonight. Thank you for this church that loves its people, that loves your people, that has a heart to speak to women and to moms, to uplift them, to encourage them. God, I pray that you would do just that in every single situation, that in every family that is represented here tonight, that you would be at work, that they would feel encouraged, that they would feel loved, that they would feel your strength that they need for each and every day. And that, God, that you help all of us together to focus in on you, to truly parent to the audience that we have of you. And that we could just hone in incredibly focused on what you desire for us and our families. We thank you for what you've done for us on the cross. We thank you for every authority and power you've given us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Wow.
All right.
That was so good. Thanks, Matt.
Absolutely.
That was really good.
Let's get after this.
Yes. Okay, so if y'all have not texted your question, go ahead and do that. We do have already a couple. They've been trickling in. So your first question is going to be, how do I train up my child in the instruction of the Lord if I'm still learning that for myself, if I'm a new Christian still learning?
Fantastic question. That is an awesome question. I love the heart behind it. Bring your kids along with the journey. I guess one of the really awesome opportunities that we have, whether you're a brand new Christian or you've been a Christian since you were 5 years old, 6 years old, and you've been doing this thing for 25 years, you get to show your kids humility and do their Bible. If you, on Sunday mornings, and I don't know all the different resources, I'm confident the children's ministry team has resources for parents. Do the Bible study with them and share with your kids what you're learning. And you get to be like, that's awesome. I didn't know that about this story, and I'm learning with you. And it gets to be like a team event to where you're learning. And then my biggest encouragement is find another mom who's a mature believer, who's been a believer longer and is more knowledgeable. So when you run into those questions that you don't know the answer to, tell your kid, man, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to go get the answer for you, and we're going to learn together. And it helps build that bond of togetherness, and you get to learn and grow in your faith as well as you see God growing their faith. But that's a phenomenal question and a great heart behind wanting to raise up your children.
Next question. How can I stop yelling at my children? That's me.
Yeah. So my biggest encouragement, and this is, I did some marriage counseling as well when I was a pastor, and learning to take a time out. So give yourself a time out, and verbalize it. What kids struggle with is if we storm out of the room, and been there, done this, so this is not casting stones in the least bit. But if you feel yourself getting there, and you just go, "Ugh," and then you storm out of the room, what the kid feels is, I just did something so horribly wrong that I made mommy so mad she had to leave. And they don't know when they're coming back. They don't know what level of mad you are, and it starts to make them question and feel the weight of your emotions. So instead, you have the opportunity to say, hey, mom is getting a little bit upset and frustrated right now because of what's going on. So what I would like for us to do is take a 10-minute break. And I'm going to go to my room, and I'm going to ask that you go either to your room, to the playroom, whatever their space is. So that way it's not a punishment. I'm not banishing you to your room. It's not a punishment you're going to your room. But I'm going to go to my room, and I'm going to lock the door. Please don't hurt one another in a significant way that we have to go to the hospital. And I'm going to take a time out. Mom is going to take a time out so that I can calm down and we can have a conversation about what's going on, because I want to have a conversation with you. I don't want to yell at you. So I want to control my emotions. So I'm going to take a time out to do that. What an incredible teaching moment for our kids to be able to show them and demonstrate to them what it looks like to have a healthy conflict. In the same way in our marriages, we can do the same thing. Because typically what happens is there are two different types of people when it comes to processing information. One person needs to go be alone, think about it, process it, really digest what's happening, think through their response. And then the other type of person needs to talk it through. They want to think about it and they want to verbally process. Those two people usually marry each other. And it doesn't work out super great. So I'm the verbal processor. My wife is the think it through. So what we have learned is when we start getting to that place, that the frustrations and tensions are getting high, we need to call a timeout. And it's not a punishment to the other one. It's not against you. It's me personally. I need to take a timeout. So we're going to take 30 minutes. We're going to take 10 minutes. We're going to take an hour, whatever it is, fill in the blank. And we're going to pause this conversation. We're going to cool off. We're going to let emotions come down. And then we're going to re-engage this conversation together. if we can model that to our kids and teach them that, how much healthier friendships, relationships, and marriages will they have if they've learned that at 5 years old, 6 years old, 10 years old, whatever it is. So if that's an area that you're struggling, first off, experience grace. Like, feel God's grace. We've all screwed up. We've all yelled at our kids. And it's like, I'm not saying it's okay because, it's not what we want, but experience God's grace first and foremost. And now work towards what can I do differently going forward. And what I can do differently going forward is when I feel myself getting there, I'm going to give myself a timeout. And this is also one of those like having perspective moments. If something gets broken in the house, it's going to be okay. Like, I would rather have that timeout and not scream at my kids and not inappropriately discipline my kids and a lamp get broken than not take the time out because I'm afraid of something getting broken and end up screaming at my kids and disciplining my kids inappropriately, right? So we have to have that priority decision because I know that's some of the fear is if I leave my kids unattended, something or someone is going to get broken. And like we need to be able to break ourselves of that fear a little bit and don't parent out of fear and say, hey, I'm gonna go take the time out, right? So that's one way. That's not the way, but a way.
Thank you. That was my question for me. I just find myself yelling more than I want to sometimes. So I'm just keeping it real, ladies. I'm just keeping it real. All right. Next question. At what age do I let my children have responsibilities and not handle everything for them?
Great question. Some of it depends on what the responsibilities are. And this goes back into the lifeguard, life vest conversation. And you have to kind of look at it and go, okay, is this a life vest moment or a lifeguard moment? And I'm a big believer in progression. And I talk to kids about this all the time, but also parents, is progressing kids along the way. So we're not going to jump straight from you don't know how to drive to driving on DNT at 85 miles an hour. I know the speed limit is 70, but let's be real, we're going 85.
We're keeping it real.
Right? I know how fast we're going. But so we're going to progress that, right? And so when it comes to responsibilities, I'm a big believer, even if it's something that's completely unrelated. So when my daughter wanted a hamster, now granted, she wanted a hamster while I'm overseas. So I was like, this is a terrible time for this. But what we did is we set up like, okay, if you want a hamster, you need to show us that you can be responsible for your hamster. So you have to feed the dogs, the current ones that we already have, and you have to show me that you're responsible enough on your own without us reminding you to feed the dogs. And if you can do that for 3 months, then we will let you go get a hamster that you saved up for. Because the other piece was she had to save up the money. How bad do you really want this? So if a kid wants to drive, how bad do you really want to drive? Because you're paying for the insurance, or you're paying for the gas, or whatever else. Are you willing to give up your money to do what it is you're saying you want to do? My daughter is 9. We have 3.5 acres, so it's not a push mower situation. This is a riding mower situation because I value my lungs. And she decided she was going to mow the grass. That was terrifying because she's now riding a tractor that has spinning blades that can, cut off limbs if somebody does something stupid. So what we did was she drove it around without the blades on, and I just let her drive just to show her how it worked, all those sorts of things. Okay, now I can trust that she actually can operate the thing. Her legs are long enough to hit the pedals, all those sorts of things. So then it was, all right, we're going to do 2 passes with the blades on. Cool. I walked alongside her the whole way. And then it was, now I'm going to let you mow a decent chunk of the yard while I'm out in the yard. And that's the phase we're at right now. Eventually, it's going to be like, hey, go mow the yard. And she's going to go do it by herself. But it's a progression thing. And so every kid's going to be different. And this goes along as well with technology of like phones. Every kid's going to have a phone at a different age. What's appropriate for you and your kid is going to be different than what's appropriate for me and my kid. And some of that has to do with your kid. Like some kids are ready at 12 to handle certain responsibilities, and other kids not anywhere close. And that's okay, and it's up to you. And that's why it's so important as a parent. You know your kid better than anyone else. So going back to the audience of one, to tune out the voices that are saying, are you really not going to let your kid have a phone? No, I'm not, because they're not ready for it. But they're 14, and every other 14-year-old has a phone. Cool. Well, my 14-year-old is not ready for a phone. I don't trust them with the phone because they've proven over time they're not ready for it. So my 14-year-old's not going to have a phone. guess what? You're not my audience. So thank you for your input. Appreciate the conversation. But so I think that's when it comes to responsibilities, it's have they shown the ability to handle that responsibility over time and then progressing it and stepping into it.
Okay, next question is, why are my kids nice and respectful to others, kids and adults, kids and adults, but then mean to each other and disrespectful to me?
Everyone texted that question, right? Like literally every single person, because my kids, right? So this is actually a psychological phenomenon that's pretty interesting. Is kids are going to let their guards down when they're in their safest place. So, as much as this sucks to hear, and it really can get frustrating at home, if your kids are acting up at home but never acting up anywhere else, you're doing a great job. Because that means your home is the safest place for them, that they can let their guard down and they can act up because they are feeling safe. So when they come to church or they go to school, they know they can focus and they can increase that level, but they can only hold that for so long. Like physically, psychologically, they can only hold that for so long. So when they come home, they let that guard down. And we see some of that acting up, some of that behavior, some of that disrespect, and we're going, what in the world? Every other person tells me my kid is amazing. The Sunday school teachers are like, your kid is wonderful. They're so nice and they're sweet and they're helping everyone else. And I'm like, I literally watched them smash their sibling's face into the ground and like scrape it on the carpet before coming to church. And then they walk into church like they are an angel. Like, no, they're not. Don't you lie to me. So genuinely, and I can say this both from study and reading psychological journals, but also, and I'll genuinely say this from my experience as a police officer, when I go into homes, the homes that are broken and not safe for kids, so they're abusive homes or they're not safe homes, those kids are incredibly well behaved in the home, because that's where they're not safe. So they act up at school where it's safe. That's a sad reality when school is their safe place. So if they are good at home and act up at school, we need to ask the question, I don't mean this accusatory, we need to ask the question, what's going on at home that's making this not a safe place? If they're angels at school, with their sports teams, at Sunday school, and everyone compliments you on how amazing of a parent you are, and then you get home and you feel like an utter failure because everything is going awry and it is a war zone, that actually means your home is a safe place. And that's why you're seeing the behavior you're seeing. So hopefully that's encouraging, but also the reality of you're going to see that type of behavior at home. So that's actually the psychology behind it.
All right. I never thought about it like that, but I'm learning a lot of things. This is good. Okay, next question. So how do you be a lifeguard or life vest when drugs are introduced to them?
Life vest moment. It's as simply as I can. That's a life vest moment. And so, especially people want to say, weed is by and far, like that is 100% by and far the number one drug we see. We see it on the streets, we see it in the schools. That is by and large, and everyone, because it's becoming more socially acceptable, it's becoming legal in other states. I don't know if y'all know this, it's legal in Oklahoma. So we have a massive problem with people going up to Oklahoma, grabbing it, and coming back down into Texas. We see it almost on a nightly basis. And people don't want to admit that it's a gateway drug. That's a nasty term now in society that we don't talk about it. And I'm not saying every single person that's ever smoked weed is going to go to heroin, but I can tell you every person who's doing heroin probably smoked weed first. So I don't know, I can't tell you all the psychological reasons of why, in terms of why this person did and this person didn't, but I can tell you the drug addicts that you see that are on the hard stuff that have ruined their lives and wrecked their brains and everything else, it's extraordinarily rare that someone, the first time they try drugs, it's meth, heroin, MDMA, any of those sorts of things. Very, very rare that that's the case. And so if drugs are introduced, that's the mama bear lifeguard or life vest moment to like, okay, we need to pull back and do whatever it takes to get control of that situation now. And those are the types of conversations I have with kids on the streets. Most kids don't realize that at 17, you're an adult in the state of Texas, which means you get to go to big boy jail. You do not get to go to juvie, you go to big boy jail. So at 17, when I run into you on the streets and you've got a quarter ounce of marijuana and you think it's no big deal, I'm just going to get a slap on the wrist, and then all of a sudden you're in a jail cell with a 45-year-old person who just did something horrible, right? And that's the juvenile decision with adult consequences, right? And so those are the times where that's the time to take the reins and do whatever it takes and be vicious about that. So if that means cutting off friends, if that means moving, if that means pulling them out of school, whatever that means, whatever that looks like to stop that spiral, that's the life vest moment. And I very rarely go to extremes. Like just the person I am, I try to stay very like not level. That's the moment. That's the time that you do whatever it takes, and you do whatever level, and then you're gonna get, and that's where you're gonna get the whole I have an audience of one, because it's like, really, are you really gonna go? It's just a little bit of weed. Like, why are you going so hard on that? Because the other piece is what typically what kids will do is weed stinks, right? Everyone, if you've ever smelt weed, you can smell it from a mile away, and it's very distinct, and it is obnoxious. So what kids have moved towards, because they realize if I smoke in my room, everyone in the house is going to know that the weed's being smoked in the room. If I smoke in my car, everyone's going to know that I smoked weed in my car. And if I smoke at all, everyone's going to smell it on me, and it's really, what doesn't smell is the vapes. And that's what we've seen a lot. What people don't know is marijuana is a low-level felony offense. Misdemeanor offense, very low. You're getting a slap on the wrist. You're still going to jail that night, but the charges are going to be pretty low. The vapes, state jail felony. So that gets you a good old felony for the vapes. I didn't write the law, I just enforce them, but that's a piece of the law that's just a little bit funky, and most people don't know that. So I can't tell you the number of 19 and 20-year-olds that I run into on the street that when it's just a THC vape. I know that just a THC vape just got you a felony. So that's why we've got to go hard on that so we don't get our kids down that path. That's the life vest moment. Good question.
I mean, TikTok has everything. So
just because you buy it at a vape shop does not make it legal. Also, BT dubs.
That's crazy. Okay, so next question. How do you deal with a child that seems to have a hardened heart against the Lord and anger issues that escalate when things don't go their way?
Oof, that's a tough one. All right, now we're getting to the hard questions. What's really hard is it's your kid, right? So the emotions are different. So I'm not trying to say that, but try and step back a little bit and look at it from the perspective, okay, what if this was a friend? What if this was just somebody I knew, a coworker that had a hardened heart towards Christ? What would I do in that circumstance? Like, would I go to them and tell them how horrible they were and how awful they are and how mad God is at them and they need to go to church and they need to turn their life around because all these things are going to happen to them? And I don't think anyone's going to agree that that's the right evangelistic model. I hope we're on the same page that that's not the evangelistic model we're going to go with. So the same sense for our children, we are evangelizing to our children, especially as they get older. If they are more hardened to the Word of God or to Christ, and we start to see that, we have to see that that's an evangelistic opportunity. And yes, we still have to be parents, and that's where it gets kind of dicey, because we have to still be parents and say this is right and this is wrong, and there's still rules in this house, and you still can't do these things. But we also need to have the evangelistic mindset and outlook of, okay, how do I minister to this human being to show them the love of Christ? So we need to love on them. We need to ensure that they know that God loves them, that God's not angry at them, that he's mad at their sin, like all those sorts of things. But they need to know above all else that God loves them. There's grace for them. They haven't run too far. We still love them. We still support them, regardless of how we feel about their actions. And then on the anger side, depending on where that level is, I'm a huge proponent of counseling. Huge proponent of counseling. And so you may get in that point of like, let's go talk to someone else because I want to help you with this, but I'm not equipped to help you with this. I don't know how to help you walk through this, so let's go talk to someone who can. And it's okay to counselor shop. So like there's this kind of notion that the first time you go talk to a counselor, you're now like tethered to that counselor. And what I hear from kids a lot is they're like, I don't feel safe with my counselor. I don't like my counselor. It doesn't help me. Well, then let's go find a different counselor. Like, you're a client. You're a customer. You get to say, this is not helping me, so I'm going to go find someone else, and that's okay. What I will say is the anger issues is usually due to an underlying issue. So what's the underlying issue? I talk a lot with cause and effect. So when we see anger, that is the effect. That's not the cause. What is the cause? What's the root issue that's going on here that we can really dig into and try to get past that anger? So see past the anger and start going into some of those questions like, hey, tell me more about that. Like, I hear that you're really angry about this, whatever it is they're shouting about, whatever it is they're angry about. Like, hey, this seems to be a pretty big reaction for that. Is there something else going on? Like, what's going on at school? What's going on? And you start to peel back the layers, and I think you'll find that there's something else that's hurting them, that's causing them pain. And the anger is just an effect of the root cause. And so if we can see through that, when I was a youth pastor, I would always talk to our leaders about this, is when you see behavior from kids, the first question I ask is, hey, what's going on at home? Like, what's going on at home? Now, you know what's going on at home, so maybe their anger is a response to some of the things that are happening at home, and we need to address that within ourselves, within our marriage, within our spouse. Maybe there's something there. But I would always ask that question because there was always a root cause. And I'll never forget, there was a night we had a 16-year-old boy, super, super hard. He was like, he got into a lot of trouble with the law. He was like, no one's going to talk down to me, any of these things. And I had the luxury of I was in the military, so he and I kind of had that connection because he wanted to go into the military. And he also knew that he couldn't like bow up on me because I was not going to end well for him. And so he's cussing at me. Kids cussing at me outside the church because I caught him trying to sneak out. And I said, hey, Luke, what's going on at home? Kid starts bawling in front of me. Just broke down. And he had a nasty situation going on at home. And so for you, maybe it's not what's going on at home. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's something that's happening at school. Maybe it's something a friend said to them. Maybe it's something, fill in the blank litany of other things that's going on that is the root cause, and the anger is the effect. So if all we do is treat the effect, the cause is still there. That root cause is still there, and we haven't dug that up. And until we dig that up, all that's going to happen is maybe they control the anger, but now it comes out in promiscuity. Or they control the promiscuity, and it comes out in greed, or it comes out in anger, it comes out in whatever, because that root cause is still there. What we're seeing on the outside is just going to change a little bit.
And then if any of y'all do need some counseling services, I know we can always just have you guys reach out to Dee. You can email her, or y'all can just also check out our website at church and then email there too. So we can give you some resources if you do, feel like you need some counseling or your children need counseling. So thanks for that. That's good. So we have time for 2 more questions. And ladies, if you still have questions even after these 2, you can still text your questions to the number. And then we'll either find out a way that we can put them on our Facebook page and answer them that way, or Matt also was kind enough to say they can just reach out to me, so we can give you that information as well. So the next question. My kids are in public elementary school, and gay, lesbian, trans is always coming up. How do you have a proper conversation with a 7-year-old on these topics when this is not something we support in our home and does not support our religious beliefs? And this is very common.
Yeah, super common, and that was one that, honestly, I'm surprised it took this long to get to go into that. I was like, this one's definitely coming up.
Saving the best for last.
Right, yeah, that's great. And this is really challenging, and it's a difficult conversation because you have to try and find a way to communicate this at an age-appropriate level, and not getting into trying to get into a deep theological exegetical breakdown of all these different things. You have to get to a age-appropriate conversation. And so what we have done, and I'm not saying this is the way, it's a way. What we have done is every time these types of things come up. So the first time for us was, I'm drawing a blank, with the little doctor show where the girl's the stuffed animal doctor. Doc McStuffins, thank you. Doc McStuffins was the first one that my daughter came across it. There was a couple, like the parents of one of the characters was two women or two men, I can't remember. And so Cora went, wait a minute, that's weird. Because at first she thought it was like two different parents for two different kids, and then all of a sudden they have the same kid. And so she's like, what dad, like what's going on? I'm like, sweet, we get to have this conversation. And so the way we have described it is that God loves everyone. God loves all of his children, regardless of the decisions we make. And just like we have made decisions that God does not agree with, other people have made different decisions that God does not agree with, and he still loves them, he still cares about them. But we strive in our household to honor God with all of our decisions and all of our choices. And the way that God has designed a marriage and a family is for it to be a man and a woman together. And that's what God's design is for us, but we've all made decisions that are not in line with what God designs for our life, and so we're always striving to do that more. So that way we've kind of taken the onus off that specific thing and we've broadened it and a little bit more generalized and said, hey, we are answering the question. We're not dodging the truth, but we are saying like, hey, that's not what God's design is for us. But just like they're doing something that God hasn't designed for them, we do things every day that God does not approve of, that God does not agree with, and so we strive in our family to honor God in this way. When it comes to the trans issue, and this one gets more challenging in my opinion, because it's really hard to describe that to our kids because they don't comprehend it. I guess not, like, as much as we want to say gender's not binary in this society, like, kind of is. Like, the reality of the world is that it is. And so they have a hard time wrapping their minds around it. And so I think that's where you kind of have that similar conversation of God has designed each and every one of us uniquely, and therefore he's designed us to be who he created us to be. And sometimes people who don't know God go away from that, and they're searching for something else that will make them feel whole because they're not allowing God to make them whole. And so that's why in everything we do, we want to allow God to speak into our lives because he's the only one who fulfills us. He's the only one who will make us whole. He's the only one who will give us our true identity in him. And as long as people don't know God, they're going to be looking for an identity that's different than what God has for them. And so it kind of pulls back just a little bit. We don't dive into, so we don't go into like, what is transgender? Like, we don't go into hormone therapy and hormones and sex changes. Like, our kids are 9 and 7. They don't need that conversation. They don't need to have a grasp of what that is. We will get there. Like when my kids are teenagers, yep, diving in head first. And we're going to have that conversation because they're going to get it at school anyways. So my encouragement is the first time, and that's why we ask that monthly check-in of like, hey, what have you seen? What have you heard that you have questions about? So we can try and get in front of these things as much as possible and have those conversations with them. But I don't want to say the worst answer. The answer I try to avoid is that's a conversation we're going to have with you when you're older. Because here's the problem with that. Society is going to have that conversation with them right now, as early as possible. So if we are unprepared or unwilling to have that conversation with them right now, we are allowing society to have first dibs at our kids. And I don't know about you, but no one else gets first dibs at my kids besides me and my wife. Period. I don't care who you are. You don't get first dibs at my kid. I do. And so we have to be willing to enter into that conversation. I had literally the first week that I took over as the lead student pastor at church. I had been an associate for several years, and I took over as a lead student pastor. The way the schedule fell, the first week, the first Wednesday night, we were addressing homosexuality. And I was like, yeah, week 1, here you go, deep in, right? And we made a mistake. I will own this. We made a mistake. Usually we tell parents 2 weeks out that, hey, we're going to have this topic. This is what we're teaching on. I would even send them my manuscript. Here's everything I'm teaching. All there, any information you want, here it is. We just want to give you a heads up that this is going to be the content of the night. We didn't do that. We sent an email out like the day before. and I get a phone call from a very upset dad because he was like, my daughter's in 6th grade. She is not ready for this conversation. I said, hey, just a question. Is your daughter in public school? Yes. Then she's already had this conversation. I promise you. I haven't been in class with your daughter, but I guarantee you she has already had this conversation, but not with someone from the church. So if we are unwilling to have this conversation with our kids because we aren't ready or we are uncomfortable or because we deem them not ready, society has already deemed them ready. Kindergarten, society has deemed them ready for this conversation. Right, wrong, or indifferent, whether you like it or not, society says they are ready. So we have to be ready too. And that's what's really challenging is we have to find a way to do it in an age-appropriate way and kind of pull that back just a little bit. Hope that helps. And if you have very specific conversations or questions on that, I'll hang around afterwards and we can kind of talk through nuances. Or if your kid is going, if you're maybe it's not, I heard about this concept, but my kid is coming to me and telling me, we can talk about that too. But that's more of a longer, nuanced conversation, so I don't want to take all of our time up doing that.
Okay, last question.
Yep. And
This is
if
a
I could
really
jump
good
in with one more, I have one challenge at the end as well. So
Okay.
one question and a challenge.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we can do it. Do it. Okay, so as a police officer, as a police officer, what are realistic things that we need to teach or talk about with our kids? Safe words, circumstances, surroundings, or anything else?
Yes, so that's a great question. The number one thing is I'm going to go back to the Lifeguard Life Vest and making sure, actually the last piece of making sure our homes are a safe place. If we have created an environment of our homes are a safe place, they are significantly higher chance or probability that they will come to us when they hit the oh crap moment. One of the things that I encouraged as a youth pastor, and I had parents that hated me for this and thought I was an absolute crazy for saying this, is I recommend a policy with your kids of at any point in time, if you are in a position where you are unsafe or something is going on that you are uncomfortable with or is wrong, you can call me. I will pick you up. We will not talk about it. I will not ask questions. We will go home. We will sleep on it. And then tomorrow we will have a conversation regarding what was going on. Now, if you want to talk about it tonight, great. Let's have the conversation. But give them a safe out. Because if they feel like when I call mom or dad, even if they snuck out of the house, even if you had no idea that they weren't home, if they call you at 2 o'clock in the morning and Mom, Dad, I went to a party, there's drinking, there's nobody sober to drive home. I need you to come pick me up. My recommendation is to go pick them up. Don't say anything. Keep your mouth shut. Say, are you safe? Did anything happen that I have to know about tonight to ensure that you are safe? Take them home, let them go to bed, let them take a deep breath, and then have the conversation tomorrow. It does not mean there are not consequences. Don't hear me saying that we're going to let our kids sneak out of the house and there's never a consequence. I'm saying in that moment, give them a safe out. So that way they can do that. And if your home is a safe place, I'm not saying guaranteed, like we can do everything right and our kids can still go sideways. So just because your kid makes bad decisions does not mean you've done something wrong as a parent. But if we give them that safe out and we give them a safe place, we have a higher probability that they will come to us with those things. In terms of the technology, because that's where we see so much of dangerous things happening with kids, it goes back to the progression. When your kid first gets technology, that thing is locked down. They don't even have the password. You have to open it up for them. You control the apps. You control what time. You are in the room with them. Like, it is locked down. And then as they show responsibility with that, we give a little bit more, we give a little bit more, we give a little bit more. If your kid has a phone, has any form of social media, has any technology whatsoever, you have the password to every single one of those things, period. Non-negotiable in my opinion. They do not have a right to privacy in your home until they are 18. And even then, it's questionable legally. But if they're 18, they technically have some rights to privacy. But before then, right to privacy doesn't exist. So I hear a lot of parents say, like, well, I don't want to invade their privacy. No, that's your job. They don't get privacy. So whenever that time comes that my kids get a phone, if I pick up their phone and I type in the passcode that they've given me for their phone and it doesn't work, there's not a second chance. It's gone for an extended period of time, like 6 months kind of extended period of time. No, there's not a bartering. There's not a, oh my gosh, I changed it. Once again, it goes back to, I'm going to let you fail. I'm going to let you feel the pain of these consequences because the rule is I have the passcode. So if you change it because one of your friends hacked your phone and turned everything into German, maybe I've done that a few times. Okay, fine, change the passcode. But when you change the passcode, your responsibility is to come tell me what the new passcode is. And if you forget, oh, that sucks. Don't have a phone for 6 months. Right? And so the best thing I can give is give them the safe place at home to have those conversations. Even have those check-ins now when they're 3, 4, 5, but when they're 17. Hey, have you heard something, read something, seen something that made you uncomfortable or how you have questions about? Is there anything that scared you online? Because internet's a scary place. So, hey, did anyone try to talk to you online that you don't know in person? Like you don't know who the human actually is? Okay, let's talk about that. Why are we having those conversations with those humans that you don't know who they are? So when I do the technology talks, I will pick out a random person, and granted, it's got to be in a community that I know the community really well, and like I know all the schools, but I'll actually pick out a parent, and I'll have them go back to the room, and I'll have them role play as their kid. And within about 5 minutes, I'll know what school they go to, where their house is, what room in the house they live in, what window on the outside of the house their kid has, and I will know what time their mom and dad comes home. It's not hard, because 10-year-olds are 10-year-olds, and they don't know what they don't know, and they think they're talking to another 10-year-old, right? Because it's, Billy Bob 23, right? And so, that goes into those life vest moments of ensuring that we know what our kids are doing, where they are, who they're talking to, who they know, all those sorts of things. But the number one thing I can say in terms of, like, as a police officer, what I see is they have a safe place at home and they have a safe out for a situation where they go, oh no, I didn't mean to get into this, but I'm worried about getting in trouble. So they stay in a situation they know is not safe or that they know is a problem because they're afraid of what mom and dad might say or react to. And that goes back to that poker face of being able to do it. Don't get me wrong, when you go pick up your kid at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're going to be ticked off. Like I would be. But we have to regulate our emotions if we expect them to regulate their emotions, right? So that's the best thing I can have. And then
I know you have a challenge,
Yep,
right?
go ahead.
Okay, so before we get to that, ladies, again, if you have a question, you can still text it to us, and then we will answer that. Matt has a challenge for us, and then D, we still have that big giveaway. So stick around. Okay.
So, and I say this for the very end because honestly, sometimes I've done this a couple different times, and it's an emotional thing for me. And so if I do it at the beginning, it's going to be really tough to get through everything else. So I give this challenge, and it goes back to the parenting for an audience of one. So when I went overseas, I've been in the Army National Guard for the past 10 years, almost 11 now. And I deployed in 2020. So I went overseas into the Middle East in 2020. And leading up to that, I sat down, and it was a very sobering realization for me that even though the mission I went on was a very safe mission, like we weren't in a direct combat mission, we were mostly in a support and an advisory position, you're still in the Middle East. Things still go boom in the Middle East, right? And so there was this reality of I'm leaving, and I am going to say goodbye to my family, and there's a chance, because each one of us, when we leave for work every morning and we get on the highways, there's a chance that we don't come home. But for me, it was like every day when I leave to go to work or when I leave to go anywhere else, I tell my kids I love them, I tell my wife I love them, so I at least have that like goodbye moment, right? I wasn't going to have that for a year. I was gone for a year. And so as a lot of soldiers do and as a lot of people do is when they're doing these sorts of things is I sat down and I wrote a letter to my kids. I wrote a letter to my parents, my family, my wife, my kids, and that was my like last words they're ever going to read from me if something happens. This is going to be the letter I write to my kids. And it was literally, I had to write a paragraph at a time because I would just start crying. Like even now, like even just like when I take myself to that place, it's incredibly emotional. But I was in that space. And so when I wrote this letter, like I said, I had to write it about a paragraph at a time. But what it did for me was it made me so focused as a parent. Because you know what wasn't in that letter? I didn't write a single word about the grades I hope you get. I didn't write a single word about what I hope you accomplish in your job. I didn't write a single word about a degree or a school that I hope you go to. Not a single word had anything to do with being on time to anything. What I wrote to them about was that I wanted them to know that I loved them, their mother loved them, that above all else that God loves them. And I wanted them to know the character that God desires them to have. I wrote to my son about what it looks like to be a godly man. I wrote to my son about if I was there, these are the things that I would want to leave you with. These are the character traits I would want to demonstrate for you that I'm not going to be able to. These are the things that matter. So when I came back from overseas, I have never felt a more focused and freeing parenting moment in my entire life. I deleted Facebook, I deleted Instagram, I deleted anything that was going to get in the way of me parenting my kids the way God wanted me to parent. I was so incredibly focused. So my challenge for you is, and I do this with dads all the time, and so if you want to share this with your husband or your spouse or fiance or whoever, I highly encourage it, because for men, I think this is even more impactful, but I think it's impactful for moms too, is let yourself go to that place and actually put pen to paper. Write your kids a letter about the things that you want them to know, the things that your last words to them that they are ever going to read from you. If, God forbid, something happened to you and you are leaving them with these words, and actually put pen to paper. Because what it did for me is, if this was important enough for me to put in a letter the final words you're ever going to read from me, it's important enough to drive my every single day. It's important enough for me to wake up in the morning and go after that every single day as a dad. Right? And so it honed my focus and that's honestly where this talk tonight came from, was that letter. It's because I realized I parent for that audience of one, and so this was my way that I actually go back. So thank God that letter never got delivered, right? I still have it though, and I go and read it, and I update it sometimes, because that helps me go, what is truly important? So when life starts coming at us, and all the responsibilities and all the things, and one after the other, and I start to lose that focus, when I go read that, and I sit by myself and I cry because it's really emotional, I come out of that so focused. And so, like I said, take the time, but allow yourself to go to that place. And I know it's hard. Like, I get it. I will gladly confess that I wept over those pages. Not once, not twice, but time after time after time. But it brings me to a place where I realize what's truly important and what I actually care about in my job, in my role as a dad. So I leave you with that, and like I said, share that. I encourage you to share that with your husbands, because I have found for men that is really, really impactful, because we tend to drive towards one thing and want to be focused, but it's really easy with all the responsibilities and all the weight of everything else to lose. So I would encourage you to share that with your spouses and to do that for your kids. So thank you so much again for the time and opportunity to come be with y'all. I had a blast with y'all, and I will stick around afterwards. I'll hang out in the back. So if you have very specific, nuanced questions, or a question you texted in didn't get answered and you want to ask it, I'll hang around for a little while and answer whatever I can. But I so appreciate Dee and everyone else. I appreciate you guys so much. It's been a pleasure being with y'all.
Thank you, Matt.